So much of our ideas about prosperity come from two places. The first place they come from is from spiritual traditions, and the second place they come from, which then embeds our culture and our families, and the second place they come from in our culture today is they come from our economic system, which is called advertising. And so when I first got into the Science of Mind in the 80s, this was the bumper sticker that people had on their car. The one with the most toys at the end wins. Right? Do you remember that? Oh my gosh. I know I'm dating myself. Shh, don't say anything about that. Right? The one with the most toys at the end wins. And I saw people using prosperity principles from the spiritual prosperity principles to figure out how to get more toys. Actually, some of you know this. I've told this story. My microphone is weird because it was under the mask. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to stop fiddling with it. So when I first got to Science of Mind, the way that you demonstrated your prosperity principle was that you aspired to a red Mercedes coupe. And I was like, why would you want to do that? But for the price of that car, I can go buy a cabin in the woods. Hello? And I was dissed for my prosperity consciousness. What's the matter with your prosperity consciousness that you don't think you can manifest a red coupe Mercedes-Benz sports car? You better work on your prosperity consciousness. Okay, well, I got pissed off. So I thought I would learn about this thing called prosperity and try to really understand what it is that's going on. Because what we don't want to do with our prosperity consciousness is conflate it with an economic system that is designed to cause you to feel dissatisfied. And why? Why does it cause you to feel dissatisfied? So you can buy something else, right? And it seeks to convince us that we need the toy, we need the car, we need the house, we need the gadget, we need the thing, we need the toothbrush, right? So it sparkles, right? So that we're sexy and desirable and somehow more worthwhile, more whatever it is. And that whatever we have is not okay. It's not enough. It's just we are driven to buy more because, of course, that is how our market economy grows, and so we're constantly in that process. And the challenge, of course, is that there's never a place where we're satisfied. I can't get no satisfaction. My son learned this when he was 6 years old. He used to get $1. No, he didn't know when he first started out. I can't even remember. Maybe it was a quarter. Who knows? But at some point, he was getting $1 allowance because he was doing his chores, taking out the trash, helping with the dishes. And we would go to the grocery store, and every week he would want to buy a toy in the toy aisle. Every single week he would want to buy a toy in the toy aisle with his $1. And I would say, okay, do you really need another toy? I mean, it is your $1, and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, it did not take him very long, a few months, of going in every week to buy a new toy, because by the following week, the toy he had bought for $1 was broken. Right? It was a cheap toy. And it did not take him very long. And he said, Mom, no. Don't give me the $1. You just hold on to it, because I'm going to find some bright, these are his exact words. He was 6 or 7 years old. I'm going to find some new bright and shiny thing that I'm going to want, and by next week it's going to be broken. Yeah. And I thought, oh man, I wish I had learned that in my 20s before I had to cut up all my credit cards so I could pay them off for all the bright and shiny things that I thought I needed to have, right, to somehow present myself to the world. And so we invented the mom bank, and we would just leave the increasing amounts of allowance as it, got to be $2.50, and then it got to be $5, and then every once in a while he would decide there was something that he wanted, or he would find something, and then we'd go back and we'd count the weeks for which he had not yet received his allowance. And, as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, he would have $10 or $15 or $20 to spend on something because he would wait till he had that. And then he would buy a toy that lasted. And he would buy one toy that lasted, as opposed to this constant rotation of these little toys that kept breaking. And so our prosperity is not about acquisition. Prosperity is not about acquiring stuff or things. It's not about all the goodies, and it is not about trying to satisfy ourselves with all of that stuff. As Reverend Karen so beautifully talked about last week, it's always an inside job, right? Our lives are always an inside job, which means that our prosperity is something that moves from the inside out. We have things because they express the impulse of life that is the truth of our being. So some people want a big house because they have a lot of art to hang, or they have a big family, or they have a love to entertain, right? Because that's an expression of life. Now, I'll tell another story on myself. I have been known to be judgmental. No. Might surprise you. I've been known to be judgmental. Okay, so living in the Northwest, and I would go to California, right? Or I would fly to places, and you would fly in and you'd see all these swimming pools, all these individual swimming pools everywhere. And, I would have my opinion about that because I was a spiritual person. I was like spiritual. Like, really? You need to have a pool? Every one of you need to have a separate pool? And I am not, I have to admit just how very judgmental I was about all of that. Until I had a son and lived in Dallas. And my son started growing up. And I decided I would do everything for my house to be the hangout house. Because I wanted to know what my son was doing and who he was doing it with. My house was not that way when I was growing up. My house was the alcoholic, rageaholic house, and I did not bring anybody home for any reason. And so I wanted my son to have a very different experience, and I wanted our family to be very different. And so when I bought my second house in Capel, one of the things that we wrapped into the mortgage when we first bought the house was a pool. So that, and my son was, 10 or 11, and I could see in his teenage years, because he had outgrown the hot tub that came with the first house, that this was a hangout, this was a place. And sure enough, our house was the hangout house. We ended up putting in a pool table, which I had also had some judgment about. That thing that, ends up being a catch-all that nobody uses. Well, he and his friends used it all the time. Do you see? It was an outpicturing of the life that I wanted to have for our family and for Jason and for his friends and for the experience that we were creating. It wasn't so I could say, oh, look at me, I have a house with a pool. Do you see the difference? That was a big turning point for me in my understanding about prosperity and about why we do actually then acquire things and build things and have things, because they are expressions of the life that is the truth of who we are. And what's important about this is that it's different for each and every one of us, right? Because when I downsized, I didn't need a pool anymore. I downsized into a 1,450 square foot condo. I love it. I love it. Small, compact, that's what I need at this point in my life. And it's absolutely perfect for me today, because it also freed up the opportunity for Karen and I to buy that cabin in the woods. Because that's also an expression. Do you see? But you might want the big house, or the house on the lake, or no house at all, so that you can get the RV and travel around the world, or whatever it is. Do you see that it's our job to understand what life and what level of prosperity is the outpicturing for us? So the second myth we want to bust today is it's more spiritual to be poor. Remember the judgment about the pools? oh my God, I had to really come to grips with the judgment that I had about people that were wealthy, about people who had money. Well, because I assumed that they were all being, they were all climbing over everybody else and they didn't care about anything else, and they obviously were not spiritual. So for years, I clearly lived with a vow of poverty. And my finances and my prosperity demonstrated that. I went into greater debt. That's the whole, having to finally cut up your credit cards. And I learned that it's not that money itself, right? What's the phrase? Money is the root of all evil. Oh my gosh, right? We all know it. But the point is that the phrase actually says it is the love of money that is the root of all evil, right? And what are we told? Have no other gods before me. So when we have the love of money, we're worshiping money, thinking that it's the thing that's going to make us happy, that's going to make us feel fulfilled. And we're living from the outside in. That's what that phrase means. And so it's not about money itself. It's not about prosperity itself. It is when that becomes the way in which we think we are going to fulfill and satisfy our lives. And that's kind of related to the previous myth. We're going to have so many toys, so much prosperity that we win. Whatever it is. Do you think there's a door prize at the end or something? Right? And of course, it takes a while to realize that you just really actually can't take it with you. So these are some of the kinds of things that we work with in our classes. When we're teaching classes, we're constantly working on revealing these beliefs within ourselves and then taking the belief and matching it up to spiritual truth and spiritual principle and universal laws and reality and asking ourselves, is this really the way the universe works? Is this really spiritual truth? So I'm going to start a class in November called Spiritual Principles and Practices. It's a 5-week course, 6-week course, and really begins to talk about these things. It's a brand new course that we have, and it's an opportunity to identify spiritual principles so that we can walk around in the world and ask ourselves, is this in alignment with truth, spiritual principles, or is this some other kind of weird, false, hidden belief, maybe not so hidden, that's running our life? Okay, the third myth I want to bust is it's never enough. There's always more, and I should have it. There's never enough, or we might say not just there's always more, but I always need more. I always think I need more. Right? And so this was a next huge revelation for me around prosperity. As I did a lot of, I got my degree at the University of Dallas, and I took a lot of classes there. We had one class on the psychology of the modern age, and they talked about the Juggernaut of Modernity. I was like, that's a big term, the Juggernaut of Modernity, right? And we all have experienced it as what's brought us to the brink of climate change and the extinction of species and all of the inequality that we find in our economic system. The Juggernaut of Modernity is unfettered progress, the constant belief or desire or sense that we must always make more, have more, without thinking about how that is impacting others, right? And that's the more on the plane, the same plane as the one with the most toys at the end wins, right? Because it's the more of all of the stuff that we get to make, acquire, pull out of the earth, continue to use to pollute the air, all of those kinds of things. And I've been an environmentalist since the 70s. And I found my values, my environmental values, and this push towards prosperity in conflict. Like, how does that work? I don't really get that until I realized, oh, wait, there's always more than enough from a spiritual point of view. There's always more than enough. But if I'm living from the inside out, if we're living from the inside out, what we're creating and acquiring is an expression of who we are. It's not just a never-ending acquisition of stuff, which, as we know, now creates, the pollution of plastic everywhere and in our oceans and all of that. Everything that's happening on our planet today is a result of the juggernaut of modernity. So I began to wonder, how does the abundance of the universe show up sustainably? How does it show up sustainably? And I thought, well, I'm a nature girl, right? I go out into nature and I look around, and that's how the universe is manifesting itself. So let's see, what can we see? And what we see is that in the physical universe, there's always enough. There's always enough. If we're not mucking around in it as human beings, right? There's enough. Even there's enough rain in the desert for the cactus to bloom. Beautiful spring blooms, even though it looks all, dry and dead. There's always enough. And when there's a big flood and we think, oh my God, there's more than, that's too much, it's too much. Big giant flood. What's happened is the fields have been replenished with the most fertile soil that there is. And so there's enough for the whole next regeneration of the meadows and the fields. There's always enough. So I began to explore this word, enough. And how many times when somebody says, well, it's enough, and we immediately assume that the word enough is a negative, because what we hear is, well, it's just enough. It's barely enough. And what we want is more than enough. We want more than enough. But isn't more than enough, isn't that filling our mental equivalent to have enough, to have the life that allows us to express who we are? We have enough financial freedom to do the things that are important to us. We have enough to contribute. We have enough to give and to tithe and to share. We have enough to have a life. And that continues to grow sustainably because it's enough. What if it was enough? They've done a lot of studies that say at a certain point, doesn't matter how much money you make, you're not any happier. They've done other studies with billionaires, millionaires, and billionaires, and there is a threshold of multimillionaires and billionaires where the satisfaction level of the amount of money somebody has actually goes down. Because each time they make a benchmark and say, well, when I have that much money, then I'll have enough, it's not enough. And there has to be more and more and more. Why? Because we're living from the outside in when we're doing that. When we're living from the inside out, as Randy so beautifully expressed, that just brought me to tears. Randy, thank you so much for sharing that. That was really, right? As life grows, our prosperity grows. Right? It's a natural unfoldment as we grow, as we align spiritually, as we fulfill ourselves, as we can become more of who we are. There is enough for our life to grow, to flourish in a sustainable manner for our own lives and the way in which we impact. So I really encourage you to spend some time with the word enough. The other place that I've really practiced this in is in eating. Are you a potato chip eater? Yes. Right? The whole bag. And afterwards, what do we think to ourselves? Did I really have to eat the whole bag? Surely somewhere back there was enough. The other place for me is pasta. I can eat plates and plates and plates and plates of pasta. It's ridiculous. And then my body is my body is like, oh, so unhappy. What is enough? Think about it, a beautiful meal, a good meal, and you say, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied. Why? Because you know tomorrow you're going to eat another good meal. Do you see? Enough becomes a sustainable lifestyle, not this is the only meal I'm ever going to have that's ever going to be this good, so I must stuff myself until I'm uncomfortable and unhappy about it. Do you see? Because the universal abundance is never ending. Having enough right now allows us to then experience the next moment of enough, and the next moment of enough, and the next moment of enough, because it is the universe that is infinitely abundant. And we are infinitely experiencing that. Getting my prosperity means that someone else won't get theirs. And I see this and hear this a lot when we are thinking about prosperity, especially when people are really working with, I'd like to be more financially free, I would actually like to make more money in a job, I would like to actually be more prosperous. There's nothing wrong with that, because we actually have a greater desire to express our lives. We want to be free to have the life that we want to have, and each one of us should have that. Emma Curtis Hopkins says there is good in the universe and I ought to have it. There is good in the universe, and you ought to have it. And because the universe is abundant, we have to get over the idea that as our life grows and our life flourishes, that somehow we're taking from others. We are talking about using and working with the universal abundance, not I'm going to have that person's job so that I can make that money and they don't. Right? And so we can really begin to set that aside and recognize that as we are moving through all of this, we are expressing our freedom to be who we are. We are living from the inside out. Let me go back to that one. I want to go back to that one. The other thing I want to say about that is that it is not true prosperity if it is at the expense of others. It's not. How do we know that? Well, we can just look at what's happening on our planet today. Right? It's not true prosperity when some people have it and a whole boatload of people don't. It's not true prosperity when our prosperity is achieved by things that impact the planet in such a way that we are now facing a climate crisis. This is not true prosperity. It's not true prosperity when the amount of money that I take out of a company keeps me from paying my workers a decent living wage. This is not true prosperity. Right? Science of Mind says you can have or do anything you choose as long as it harms no one. And that has to be thought about. It has to be thought about. And the recognition that as our prosperity grows, rather than having it be on the back of anyone else, that our prosperity grows so that we can express more, give more, do more, grow businesses more, grow lives more, grow employees more, grow all kinds of things more. As opposed to thinking that somehow we can have it and it doesn't matter how it impacts others. All abundance contributes to abundance for all of us when we recognize that true abundance, the Science of Mind also teaches that I can have anything I want that I want for others. Right? I can have anything that I want for others. And so if I want prosperity, right, I want that prosperity for others. I want that joyful, financially free life that allows each and every person to have the life of their dreams. Not my dreams, not the dream of a parent or a corporation or a government or an ad, but the life of their dreams. So the last myth we want to bust is that prosperity is about getting and receiving. Again, I want to refer to Randy's beautiful testimonial, right? It is in the giving that our prosperity grows. It is in the recognition that as we give, that void continually is refilled by the abundance of the universe. That's the abundance we're relying on. That's the abundance that we're expressing. That's the abundance that we're experiencing. And so for me and for so many others that I've heard speak about this, right, it is the desire to be generous, to contribute, to be philanthropists that grows prosperity, true prosperity, in such an amazing way. Now, whether we appreciate the Rockefellers or not, right, there's all kinds of stuff about all of that. The amazing thing is they gave 90% of their money away. They built all the libraries all over the United States and schools, public schools. It's unbelievable. They gave away 90% of their money. You know that Warren Beatty and a whole bunch of other billionaires have pledged that they'll give 50% of their money away. I'm not sure how they think they're going to keep their other 50%. I guess they're going to give it to their families. They're not going to take it with them, right? We can't take it with them. So pledging to give 50% of it away. Eric Butterworth says when you give 10%, like tithe, when you give that 10%, we all have to work our way up to it. And when we do that, we have started to take off our training wheels. Karen and I give almost 20% of our combined household income. We give it away. Because that's prosperity. Out of prosperity comes a natural generosity. And the more generous we are, the more prosperity we experience because we are relying on the abundance of the universe. CSLDallas tithes as well. We tithe to where we are spiritually fed. We tithe to our spiritual organization, our larger organization. We also tithe to people and individuals, and we tithe to our not-for-profit partners. We take our tithe and we contribute to those things and places and people that we believe spiritually feed this organization. So again, Randy, you must have been set up for my talk. Again, as Randy so beautifully said, right, you may think that you're giving to the organization, but the truth is you're actually giving to each other. We're giving to each other in a way that allows us to grow this organization and give more and be more and do more good work in the world. And so we regularly tithe. We tithe every week. We tithe every month. We send our tithe out to wherever it goes. And today we want to acknowledge that it is our community that spiritually feeds this organization and each other. With your testimonials, with every time that you say a TSRW, you are feeding someone else in this community who doesn't know yet that they can have that. And your life is that testimonial. And you feed this organization with your contributions, right? The most extraordinary thing is that through the pandemic, our pledge to actual is higher than it's ever been. Right? So what that means is the people who have pledged to us in the last 2 years have been more committed to their pledges than ever before.
Yes. Do you hear that?
We would not be here today doing this. We might be closed. Do you understand that? How many communities have closed?
A lot of them.
And it's because of you.
Yeah. It's because of you. I don't have a mic. So the AIS committee which is made up of generous givers in this community that are dedicated to tithing to this community, decided that you have spiritually fed us all year. So we are going to give to you. So we are giving, this community's giving money to you. Anyone that's here in our sanctuary and on campus today is going to receive money from our community. It's called a reverse tithe because it's significant this year, by all means, in these past 20 months. Because of the generosity of everyone in this community, last year we got to put money into our reserves. And as at $50,000 in our reserves, because we do take great care of every dollar we're gifted and given. And that's amazing in the midst of a pandemic. We could put money in our reserves.
Yes.
And so there's only one rule to this that you must follow, okay? Or don't accept this. You cannot, what you receive today, you cannot give it to this community.
So we don't
But you can. We don't want you to put it in the offering plate
any of
today.
these envelopes in the offering plate.
No, but everything else. This is your gift to receive from the universe.
This is for you to accept your goods. So Reverend Karen and Tariq are going to be passing it out. What we invite you to do is to simply find your envelope in the baskets, right? They've been shuffled. There's lots of different denominations, lots of different amounts. For you, we also include our band and those people up in the crow's nest up there. We include our Joy Village. Please make sure anybody outside also gets to choose an envelope. And this is an opportunity for us to really acknowledge that in many ways you are the source of this community, as Randy so beautifully said, and we are the source for each other for this profound good that we experience together as a community. And it moves me each and every time, right? Each and every time that people speak about how their lives have been changed, how their prosperity has grown, because they have learned spiritual principles. And it is living upon those spiritual principles that changes everything. And now our prosperity is actually fulfilling. It actually allows us to contribute to life in whole new ways that maybe we never imagined before. It allows us to accept our good and not feel guilty about our good and not wonder whether or not we deserve it. Right? We deserve it because it is the abundance of the universe that is flowing through us, allowing us to express our lives and to contribute the gift that each and every one of our lives is. That's the whole point. It's the only reason, right? I've always thought the only reason really for me to aspire in any way, shape, or form to be really wealthy is I would like to be a patron of the arts, and I would like to give 90% of my money away. Right? That's the goal that I have. I've already given away $1 million. I'm working on my second $1 million. Because that's the point, right? That's the point. And so we also want to let you know that George and Bill Holman are going to be over in the artist gallery. They're going to be talking about their art after the service, between the celebration and before our painting a new picture event. And so Bill is donating any of the staffs that are. Oh, thank you. Any of the staffs that are purchased anytime, if you decide to buy one of those, all the proceeds come to CSLDallas. He's donating all of those. George, one of his beautiful paintings, he's donating the big painting right beside the kitchen. He's donating that to CSLDallas, right? I mean, that's the cycle. That's the circle. That's the circle. Right? That's the circle. The more we give, the more the universe has to flow into the coffers so that we can give more, so that we can spread more. And I'm going to date myself again. You know, money is like manure. It should be spread around, encouraging young things to grow. Right? Money doesn't do any good in the bank all by itself being hoarded. Of course, we need money in the bank, right? We talk about good stewardship of what we have, right? But not in a hoarding, clutching, clinging way, but to grow things, to grow our lives in a way that is really profound and spiritual. Okay, so there are a couple other rules to this that Karen did not mention. One, do not put any of this money back in the offering. Your job today is to accept your good. The universe is doing this all the time, everywhere, showering good upon us, and we are turning our back on it and saying we don't deserve it or we don't need it or somehow this is not yours. So this is your opportunity to do a little spiritual practice about accepting your good. The second thing is sometimes people do these things and they say, oh, you got to invest it in something and contribute it to something and then, come back and give CSLDallas 10%. No, this is a free gift because the universe's abundance is free. Because it's, the rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. The sun is always shining. The universe doesn't play favorites. And so the universe is forever showering us with good. And our job is to accept it, to be open to it, and to allow it to flow through us in meaningful and purposeful ways. And then our prosperity is so joy-filled. It's so joy-filled. And we use it for our own good to, travel or buy a cabin in the woods. And we use it to make a difference in the world. And the more our light shines, the more of a difference we are making. So, I hope that we have perhaps busted a few myths about prosperity, and we have come to a new place with it. I invite you to just, hang with it, see how it fits, flows for you. Now I'm pattering just a little bit to make sure they're all done. I do want to say to the people online, we gave a lot of thought to how we could do this with those of you online, and we have not yet come up with an answer. But I promise you that the next time we do a reverse tithe, those of you online will be included. We just have to figure out what that looks like. We're in a whole new ball game now, and we will figure that out. Absolutely. All right. So I think, I don't know what we're doing next. I think I'm lost.
Well, I think we're moving into, isn't it great? Accept your good.
So I hope you've opened your envelopes and just enjoyed the universe's abundance.